Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Food Origins Podcast. This episode is sponsored by Firecracker Farm, and if you're watching, you guys will be able to see it. They are a company out of Florida that infuse hot peppers into sea salt. Really awesome stuff. I've been using it for over a year now. They come in these awesome push grinders. This is a special buddy batch called Snake Eater. It's infused with Tennessee bourbon and bitters. Really cool stuff. I love using this on eggs in the morning, steak as a finisher. Really good stuff. Some of my two favorites also is Pineapple Express and Apocalypto. And 10% of the proceeds go to Op 300 and Pipe Hitter Foundation. Get that in there for you guys. And I have a discount code 10% off Food Origins Pod C at firecracker.farm. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening.
Perfect. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Food Origins Podcast. Today, I'm stoked to have Greg Putnam of Little Belt Cattle Co. He's the co-founder and president. He's also spent almost 10 years in the Navy as a Navy SEAL. His partner, Tim Sheehy. Congrats to Tim for being our now U.S. Senator for Montana. Greg, it's an honor to have you on, man. And I know we've been trying to do this for a little while. Appreciate you, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to podcasting here with you today.
Awesome. I kind of just usually get into kind of taking us back where you're from. Give us your ethnic background, where you grew up. I know you grew up in Pennsylvania. Give us some ins and outs of that. And what'd you eat growing up?
Oh, that's a great question. Like you said, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I'd say we ate, I don't know, I mean, a pretty classic, American diet, I guess you would say. I have two brothers, and, so a lot of that had to just do with getting everybody fed. And, honestly, it was like pretty classic type American food, like eggs, bacon, pancakes, waffles, like that kind of stuff for breakfast. Like sandwiches and stuff for lunch, and then chicken, steak, pork, a lot of stuff on the grill. But my family, like all my uncles really cook a lot. My mom, is a really good cook, and she obviously had a number of people to relied on her cooking for a long time. But that's something that's always been big on our family. Like my folks were just out here for Christmas, and I feel like the day usually starts with some sort of breakfast and coffee, and then talking about what we're going to have for dinner that night and who's cooking what. So we always did, something my parents did that we definitely still do a lot in our houses is a big focus around family dinner, and, everybody being there and kind of rehashing the day. And, that's something that we always did, when I was a kid, and my dad would get home from work and, we'd be at sports or whatever, but, we would always try to eat together, at dinner as best we could. And, so still to this day in our family, I do feel like a lot focuses around food and especially getting everybody together for dinner.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like it's funny how like you can just put a time on it and say like, hey, 6:00, you better be there for dinner. Whether you're doing homework, you're out playing, but 6, that bell rings, you better be there if you want to eat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, it was always funny, like if you had friends over or whatever the case would be, but everybody, really, really did get together for dinner. And that's still something with our kids that, we do. And my brother lives just kind of back behind us. And, we even do that with, on Sundays with him and his family. And, but I think that all kind of stems from kind of where I grew up, how I grew up. And, it's funny how those things that you did as a kid, kind of creep back into the way that you do things as an adult and with kids and family and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. We're in Pennsylvania, and then what's your ethnic background?
my ethnic background is pretty boring. I'm just a white guy. No, I'm part. I'm like half English and half Irish. It was kind of the you know origin there, and then I'm from Eastern Pennsylvania, so Washington's Crossing is the town, and it's like where George Washington crossed the Delaware, hence the name Washington's Crossing. Um, but family wise, or I guess like genealogy wise, uh, you know, we had family that came over like that goes all the way back, honestly, to like the Mayflower, and um, kind of grew up. You know, my folks lived in some different places, and then raised us in Eastern Pennsylvania there.
Were there any like family recipes or family dishes you think that was like a staple all the time?
Yeah, I mean, my mom still comes out like when she travels everywhere, she still brings her box of recipes, and they're all written on like cards, and a
Yeah.
lot of those are, recipes from when she was a kid and family recipes and things. And there's definitely staples in there for sure. I guess it depends on, whether the holiday or time of year or those sorts of things, but there's definitely those family favorites. Even, there's certain recipes now that we'll refer to as, if it's like my one brother's favorite, it'll be like, oh, we're making, Eric's special chicken or whatever. That's not the name of it, but just certain things that my mom knows that we all like. But it is funny because she brings this box with her literally wherever she goes. And those are Nana's recipes. And now the kids have favorites out of that. And, there's just funny things that come with that. Like, you better have a mix master. You better have certain tools that she needs. And if you don't, she will go out there and make sure you get gifted them for the next time she comes out, so that she's got everything she needs to do what she wants to do in the kitchen.
That's cool. Are there like any like old school recipes? Because there's like people were talking about like the meatloaf recipe where they're like, "Oh, you got to cut the ends off," and you're like, "Why are we cutting the ends off?" Oh, because I only had a 8-inch pan. It doesn't
Yeah,
fit. Doesn't fit in
yeah.
there. It doesn't fit in there. You know.
Yeah. You know, nothing that really like jumps out. Like I said, it's really, I feel like we've got like our staple meals that we do really, especially like holiday stuff. I feel like during the week and just kind of regular weekdays, it's just making sure everybody's getting fed with, good, uh, food that, everybody's going to eat. But like we do, for instance, for Christmas, and this just comes to mind, like when I was a kid, we used to get, just a full tenderloin, and we would get that from a local butcher that and we would basically only get them at Christmas. And so when my folks were out here this year, we did that. And it's fun to do those sorts of things that you're used to doing. And we've basically been cooking that exactly the same way for since the butcher that we used to get them from was like, oh yeah, this is a good way to do those. And so I think we have a lot of those things, but they're definitely time of year / like holiday specific. And other than that, it's more just like, you know, who's making what tonight, who's going to be home at what time, what do we have at the house, and what do you know that the kids are going to eat all of it, but also is going to be something that my wife and I like as well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But my
And
kids have gotten good at, like my parents are always making comments about how good of eaters like our kids are. But I think a lot of that comes down to, since they were little, we kind of just, not expose them to anything overly, different than probably most, but just kind of a pretty like rotation of different things. And they've become like pretty good eaters because of that. And um, I think that also kind of goes back to when I was a kid, like, you know, my mom did a good job of like rotating, kind of throughout the week, just different things. Um, but that's something we've done with our kids, and now they all have their favorites. But overall, they're pretty good. And if you try new recipes and things, they're usually pretty good about eating them, which that's how you really know if it's good or not. If all the kids eat them, you know that it's probably pretty decent.
Yeah, like a dish all the adults are eating, and then the kids are like, let me try it. And if they approve, it goes in the rotation, right?
Oh yeah. Like we made that big tenderloin and then all the kids kept coming up and wanting more and finally go, hey, you're not getting any more tenderloin. You're getting, we made some other steaks for you guys. They go, no, 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 that was pretty good. I go, yeah, I know it's good, but the adults haven't eaten it yet. So you need to wait your turn. You got your portion. But uh yeah, they got some of them between my kids and my nephews have gotten spoiled, especially on the beef side, just because they get to eat a bunch of different stuff and uh but it's good because it's made them into good eaters overall. And I think again, a strong appreciation for food and different types of food, and just the fact that food is ultimately what brings people together at the end of the day, if you think about it. And that's something that I really like about what we do now, but also is a big part. Like I said, I mean, even my wife and I, like this morning, kind of as we're planning out the day, it's like, well, who's going to be home at what time? What do you want? Do you want to cook? Do you want me to cook? What do we have here? And, and we kind of just, but that is something that definitely goes into our daily plan of the day, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think that's what a lot of us, want all the time, and what connects us. I think, it's part of the reason why I do this. Like, this food connects us all. We all sit down and eat, have a good meal. Sometimes it's not a great meal, and we'll get into those too. But before, I get into your company and how you transitioned out, tell me a little bit about your time before going to the Navy. What made you make that decision? Were you thinking about another career, and then you're like, no? Because I know you have a bunch of family that were in the military.
Mhm.
So tell me about that process. And then, obviously I want to talk to you about your being stationed in Hawaii. So the food is very good there. So
Oh yeah.
get into that, like, your process, how that all happened.
Yeah. So the Navy was always something that I had, kind of on my radar, I guess. And I had an uncle who had been a Navy SEAL, and when I was a senior in high school, took me to this SEAL reunion, which basically is just you know, yeah, every year, almost like college or whatever, they get classes together, and this would have been his 20-year reunion, and then they do this whole deal where they have all these different showcasings of, different SEAL skills and whatnot. I remember being 18 and going to that and just being like, oh, yeah, this is, you're seeing guys jump out of planes and, come over the beach and like do all these things. And you're just like, oh, yeah, this is awesome. And it really at that time, kind of set this seed for me. And I ended up going to college and completing that. And while I was in college, I basically during the summers and stuff would work in typically in different ways. Like I worked in Alaska for for a summer, and then I worked in Montana, and I was working in the outdoor industry at the time. And I still kind of had this like idea of the military, and really I was exploring at that time just different units, different things. I was really interested in the kind of special operations stuff, but I kept, I was reaching out to people, I was reading books, um, and I kept coming back to the SEAL teams as kind of what seemed to be the right fit. As you're aware, like kind of all those groups have just a different, they're all just slightly different as far as the type of people I feel like that get kind of drawn to them. And I think getting into the right group that's the right fit has a big impact on how your time there is. And I know for a fact the SEAL teams absolutely was the right unit for me. And so I was doing this outdoor thing, and it's funny because even part of that there was like a lot of cooking involved. Um, we would do week-long backcountry trips, and obviously you're packing all that food in. And part of the outdoor guiding thing also was like every day you were like doing lunch, and that was a big way that you could it was something you could control that could be great regardless of how the fishing or it could rain or whatever the case may be, but you could always make a great lunch. And that was something that translated well into higher tips and return customers and all those things. So I did that for a number of years, and then when I got out of college, I did that full time while I was kind of like fully preparing. for the Navy. And I ended up doing that a little bit longer than I probably like had anticipated, just because it was going really well and I enjoyed it. And then I got to the point where I started to, really have to decide, like, am I going to do this Navy thing or try to do this Navy thing or not? And I started getting my applications together. I'd had some injuries, and like a lot of people, you kind of have to work through just that process of getting in. And so I did that, and it was kind of one of those things I just took step by step and said, hey, if I get through this process, if I get this waiver, if I get an opportunity, if I get this contract, and I just kept getting all those things worked out. And eventually at the time, because this is when both Iraq and Afghanistan were going on. And so they were offering contracts to basically people coming off the street that hadn't been in the military before. They called it a SEAL Challenge contract. I don't know if it's still called that today, but anyway, if you met a number of criteria, which I was fortunate enough to, they would give you an opportunity to go and go to BUD/S. And that was the only opportunity, though. Just you had a spot to go to training, right? And then it was on you if you were going to make it through or not. And so I got one of those, and ended up kind of, I had like pretty good PT scores, and I was a good candidate overall. And so I was able to kind of fast track that process and went to boot camp. And then immediately from boot camp went to BUD/S.
And then where'd you end up going from there? Did you have a few
Yeah,
deployments and then get
yeah. So
stationed?
I finished BUD/S up in Coronado, and then immediately from there I went to Hawaii, and I spent almost 5 years there in Hawaii. I did some deployments out of that command there in Hawaii, and then I went to the East Coast. And same thing, I was there for a number of years, and then I finished up at a training command there in Virginia, and then we got out in 2017 and moved back to Montana at that point.
Nice. Before we skip over, but you were in Hawaii, so I kind of asked our buddy Mike about different foods that he had throughout the military, whether it was good or bad. How was the food in Hawaii?
Well, the food in Hawaii is fantastic outside of the military bases. The food on bases is pretty much the same. Which I have to say is like, I the I don't know, the military food really isn't that bad. If you're on base or whatever, and if you're not, then it's like kind of on you. But the food itself in Hawaii, and just kind of was something like super different. And we had a really great time. I mean, we had probably some of the best people that I ever got to work with. It's a really close knit command and community out there. And same thing. I mean, I just, there's not like, at least where we lived, it was different from being in other places where there wasn't a big kind of like bar and restaurant, scene. So it was a lot of, hey, we're meeting at this person's house. Somebody's bringing this, somebody's bringing that. But it was always like, oh, somebody went spear fishing and they're going to bring this. Oh, somebody's got, octopus that they just caught the name for. Oh, somebody went and got an axis deer. And it was like this very collective group. And it always was at somebody's house or at a beach and that was really cool. It was super unique in that way. But then the kind of more like traditional dishes that you find in Hawaii are also amazing. Like, I don't think I'd ever ate poke before I got to Hawaii, and you start to figure out that there's like gas stations that have some of the best poke and like your lunches and things like that. And yeah, it was amazing though. I mean, we had a really incredible opportunity there, and just honestly what made looking back on that time as like special as it was really the people that we were there with at that time. And we just had such a great community. We all kind of lived right around each other, and it didn't matter really like when you were out of work, because that command was small. I mean, if your neighbor was the higher up person at the command, you would still do, they'd still come over on Friday afternoon, right? And it was amazing because you just had and really just the timing and the group of people that were there at the time that I was there was just a really great group of people. And, um, it was an awesome place to be stationed. We had our first daughter while we were there. And so it's funny now, she's still, we go back to Hawaii still, cause we have a lot of friends there and stuff, but my oldest daughter likes to go back and let everybody know that she was born there.
Yeah, that's cool. The what island mostly?
Yeah, so we lived on Oahu, but you know, Hawaii is interesting because the islands really are small when you think about it. And so we lived on Oahu, but we were pretty fortunate because we got to travel. We pretty much went to all the islands except for um, I think it's Niihau is the only one we didn't go to, and I think that's how you say it. I might be wrong. But we ended up getting to like travel, and that's kind of what you get to do, right? Like there's a really good like inner island air system, and we ended up meeting a bunch of people or new people that knew people on other islands, and so we really got to kind of. I feel like we got like a really good um experience there on really getting to see all the different islands while we lived on Oahu.
Yeah, that's great. And then basically, like in my department too, like eating with the bosses is the best because you're with the bosses, so everyone's having a good time. You're not
Yeah,
you're not stressing
yeah.
about it too much because you're like, hey, the
No, you
bosses are here, so we're all eating together.
yeah, you kind of like I think those situations, right, where like even if your like bosses come over, they're kind of like, hey, I just want to hang out too, right? And like
Right.
um and if you don't, it's like for just how that command was structured and the size of it, there was only so many people there, right? And so it wasn't like it was just everybody. It 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 was really funny. Like outside of work, like it didn't matter. Like you had friends that kind of spanned the entire you know the hierarchy of the command. But that was cool because like you just I don't know. It was unique to that place for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you ended up transitioning out. I've got to ask you because I'm gone through a similar process of leaving your big career. How was that like? And the you had always mentioned that you wanted to go back to Montana. So how did that all transition out?
Yeah, I mean it's a tough. They tell you this right, and you go like, oh yeah, like, no problem. Like I got it right. Like I did all these things, and this isn't going to be a big deal. And then you start going through that transition process, and it's just different. But it's very, very, it is challenging in a number of ways. You're kind of, for me, like I was leaving something that I really liked doing. I was good at it. It had been but it was just the right timing for me career wise and family wise. And we really did want to be back out West and raise our kids out here. And, we'd always talked about, I remember when we lived out here before I was in the Navy and you see these little kids skiing and stuff and you're like, oh yeah, like that'd be amazing. And to have kids that, start skiing when they're little and they start, just doing all these skills that, are kind of hard to learn as an adult, but if you learn them as a kid, they just become second nature in a way. And that was something that was important to my wife and I. And so when we decided, because the military is tough and I'm not sure how the police force is, but you don't just sign up for, you don't just leave when you want, right? You sign up for another block of time. Typically it's like 4 years, or more. But then I was at 10 years. So if you do 4, you're at 14, then you're like, well, you might as well do 20. And so 4 years isn't really 4 years, I guess is what I'm getting at. Um, and you start to just look at what do you want to do? Like, where do you want to be? And so we made that decision that we were going to get out at the end of that enlistment. And we knew, I think the biggest thing with that transition is you kind of have to figure out like what you want to do or where you want to be, because those two things don't necessarily work perfectly together. Like if I said like, hey, I want to work at a big tech company and I want to live in Montana, maybe, but there's not going to be as, you might have to move to like, Palo Alto, or if you're like, hey, I want to be in finance, like you probably
Right.
aren't going to move to North Idaho, right? Um, And so, but then you go, hey, I want to be in this place. That kind of drives you into some directions of like, okay, if I live there, like, what am I going to do? Right. And I think figuring that out for people is just part of that process, because you don't know exactly what different careers are, and you don't know exactly how you're going to fit into those things. And you come out of like just a very different, unique experience that you're not going to be able to replicate again, number one. Number two, those experiences also, I think, impact what you're willing to do or like capable of doing. And I think that's something that, you just got to be honest with yourself on, what does that set of experiences drive you towards where you're going to be successful? And that set of experiences will have an impact on what you're either able or willing to do. And I think everybody just has to figure out what that is.
Yeah. And you figured something out. Tell us about the origins of Little Belt Cattle Co. So you're in Montana, figuring out business. I know you were working with Tim, and tell us, how that came about.
Yeah, you bet. So Tim and I have worked together since 2012. Our wives basically were like pregnant at the same time. We were in the same platoon together, and uh, we actually both ended up getting hurt diving, like same injury. It was like kind of a weird injury, and we just had been friends from being in the platoon together, and then just like I said, I mean, just with with kind of just very much being at the same stage of life, right? And you don't have a ton of friends where like those things line up like they do, especially with your military friends. Because like one time in one of our platoons, we were laughing about this the other day. I think we had like 9 or 10 of the people in the platoon's wives were pregnant at the same time, right? And it's just like funny things that happen. And so anyway, like Tim had gotten out, I believe in around 2015. I was completing one more deployment, got out about 2 years later. In the meantime, he had started 2 businesses here in Montana, one of which, Bridger Aerospace, is a aerial wildfire fighting company. It's a publicly traded company that's like built, grown, and scaled. And it's amazing. I mean, they've got aircraft they basically took like ISR, like military style ISR, and applied it to forest firefighting with, and I don't work for this company, so my facts might not be like exact on it, but they basically have planes that are communicating with people on the ground, providing aerial visual support, and they also have planes that provide water bombing, and they're very, very unique planes. So you basically have like an ISR plane that's communicating with people on the ground, providing, you know, that air capability. And then those planes are also guiding and directing the water bombers to come in and hit these fires and actually start to be able to deliver water and fire retardant directly onto like the hottest parts of those fires. And they use a variety of different sensors that help them do that, which is very different than how it was before Tim started that company. In that process, there was a second company that got spun out that actually started doing the sensors. And so they were gyro stabilized optics that had a variety of different sensors within the, kind of payload. And I started, when I first got out, working for that company doing, I really did everything. I mean, it was a startup. I was one of the first, handful of people that worked there. And we were doing everything from like product development to business development to sales to fixing trailers to working with our techs. And, we kind of developed a variety of different things, and that went into some other areas that ultimately led to that company being acquired by a large national defense company. In the meantime of doing that, I was kind of doing this cattle thing just as like a side project, and just something I really liked, and was just not even working. I was helping some friends, at their places. And it was just something I really liked to do. And I was kind of just doing it as like a side thing while I was also working in military tech, defense tech, at the same time.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that, And we're going to get into that because I think you are using some more technology in ranching as well, kind of converging traditional with new technology. And then you started in 2020, which is, everyone knows that's a dumpster fire year for everybody.
Yeah.
But tell us how that goes. What was your biggest challenge starting it? And tell us how that got how you got it going.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. Number one is you don't see a lot of people that go, oh, I'm going to, you don't see a lot of startup ranches, right? And so Tim and I had actually like, you know how it is when you're like sitting around on a deployment or you're sitting around in a squad car, I'm imagining, and you're just visiting with like one of your buddies, like, oh yeah, what if we did this? What if we did that? And like some of those are like, that's probably never going to happen. But we had actually like talked about this, at those types of times. And through, the different businesses and stuff that Tim had started, and then the ultimate, sale and acquisition of Ascent Vision Technologies, honestly kind of opened the door to do some different things. And him and I were talking about really like not only what I was going to do next, but also kind of what he was going to do next. He was still involved heavily in both those businesses, even after the acquisition. But I was ready to move on. And so we were just talking one day, and, I was kind of talking, and we were talking about this cattle thing a little bit. And both him and our other partner on the ranch, had wanted to reinvest back into Montana. And we started talking about, putting agriculture ground back together and starting a ranch project together, which we ultimately did. And, Tim had been looking at some different places already, something he had interested in, through some of the stuff that I'd been doing in the meantime. I had kind of developed, more of a skill set on, just being able to kind of assess like, hey, this is what we need. This is what this place could do. This is what that would do. And we really wanted to start, though, like a working operational cattle ranch, not just kind of like a recreational, acreage holding, but truly start to put acres, either keep them in agriculture or put them back into agriculture. And originally we just came up with this, we were just going to run like a very traditional livestock operation. Traditionally in Montana, you have kind of cow-calf operators or yearling operators. And we kind of looked at both and ultimately landed on running a pretty standard cow-calf operation in the very beginning. And like I said, 2020 was an interesting time. So like we came in right, it was before COVID. And our timing actually was really good, to be perfectly honest. And, that's such a big thing in business and starting business. Like it's really not luck, right? It's just timing. It's like, we came in cattle markets. We're at a place that was actually very, very good compared to where they are today to come in. And our timing was good. Our timing on getting, the ranches put together was very good, because as we transitioned, through 2020 and then into basically, COVID era, all of those things became a lot harder to get into, just because, there were so many people that were buying up acreage. Cattle markets started to go up substantially. And it also started to expose some cracks kind of in the food system that we all really truly rely upon. And I've talked a lot about this, on different podcasts and stuff. But we started to look at that then and go, how could it be even in Montana, where you like look into, the hills and you see all these cattle, but then, you go down to a grocery store and you're not seeing food that you're used to seeing on the shelf. And you talk to people that live in cities all across the country, and, people were really scared about, what would happen if you couldn't go down to your local grocery store and all the food that we all rely on wasn't there. Like, what would you do? And fortunately for us, and I think a lot of people that live in more rural places, you have access to local, farms and ranches that you might have a quarter or a half steer in your freezer, or an elk or something, right? Or you might have a garden, and all those things honestly kind of play into this comfort factor that a lot of people don't have access to that, right? So we started looking at this thing of like, what would it take to put local beef back into our local communities? I've said this before, and I'm being 100% serious. If we had known what it would have taken, like, I'm not sure we would have done it. But sometimes being kind of like naive to what that actually is going to take is kind of a benefit, because you might not even know how to talk yourself out of it, right? And there was a lot of people, number one, when we first started doing this, I think there was more people that told us this was a bad idea than there was people out there. Everybody that, when you tell them that you want to be a SEAL, loves to tell you how you're not going to be. Most of those people never were themselves. But there was a lot of people out there that were like, you're going to do what? Like, what a terrible idea. You two didn't come from that background. You haven't done it for 100 years. How could you, like, that's just not for you. Like, that's not going to happen, or it's not going to work. And again, most of those people, same deal, like, had never done it themselves, right? It's funny how all the people that love to tell you can't do stuff are people who have never done it themselves. And so I always keep that in mind of who's trying to discourage you from doing it. And I read something the other day, if they're not somebody you would take advice from, why would you let them, like, discourage you or criticize what you're doing, right? And I think about that a lot. Because there's so many people out there that love to tell you, like, oh, that'll never work, this will never work. And frankly, a lot of those people are just people that don't want to see other people be successful, because they don't have the capacity to try to be successful in something different. So anyway, we started looking at what would it take to put local Montana beef back into local communities, and that kind of led us down the road. We had already started a Little Bell Cattle Company, and we were doing really well on the live cattle stuff. I mean, it's a really intimidating thing when you put these places together. The cattle show up, and it's on you then at that point. It's living things that are 100% reliant upon, a high level of care that you're providing, whether that's moving them rotationally throughout the ranch, but, the constant making sure that they've got the right, feed, water requirements that they need is on you. And, we put a great plan together. We worked with some really great people on putting kind of a range rotation plan together. We had some amazing mentors and current business partners we still work with today that helped us get started. But yeah, we really just started putting it together. And honestly, we had enough of a foundation, I think, it wasn't like we came into this just completely. I just want to make that very clear. We did not just walk into this, never doing it before, with no experience whatsoever. I had gained some experience. I had never ran or been part of like a larger operation like this that I had, whether it was whatever you want to call it, management or decision making over, but I had experience enough to feel like, we would be successful here and be able to provide the level of care that we were going to for those livestock. So this wasn't something we just kind of walked into blindly, but I will say this, the work that we both did leading into this, when the door opened, gave us the confidence to be able to walk through it. But there was a lot of preparation that went into this to ultimately that contributed to the success.
Awesome. And before we get into kind of your day-to-day operations, got to ask, because a lot of people do want to know sometimes, is the advice for starting the business something that you know now that you wish you knew back then? 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit boring advice, but it's the best advice that I would give, and it's probably the lesson that and I think Tim would agree to this as well. When you're starting businesses, the foundation that you build in the very beginning has a huge impact on how many levels you can build on top of it. The key foundation to starting any business is good financing and accounting. And if you start with that in the beginning and you think about how that's going to look, it builds your foundation right from the start to be able to build additional layers on. If you don't have that foundation and you start building layers on top of it, eventually you're going to get to the point where you have to go back and revisit that foundation, and you will save yourself a lot of time, effort, and money if you start out with a good business plan. To the best of your ability, you start putting numbers to the actual plan itself and start to drive in a direction with profitability, with, good finances, good accounting practices. If that is not your area, probably the best place you can spend some money is either going out and getting educated in it or hire a very good controller/accountant that is going to help you be organized in that area from the get-go. Because as you move forward and build, if you have that in place, it will make your life much easier.
Perfect. You want to take us through a typical day at Little Belt Cattle for you?
Yeah, for sure. It's very seasonal for us, what kind of a day looks like, honestly.
Right.
So I'll kind of walk through almost like the little bit of the seasons that we kind of go through at the ranch. And then I'll just give everybody a quick rundown if you haven't heard me do my little spiel before. But so Little Belt Cattle Company is a vertically integrated, 100% start to finish Montana beef company. That includes both live cattle and premium beef. So when we say start to finish, we mean from the genetics that go into our program to calves hitting the ground to raising those calves all the way through a certain time in age and size at the ranch itself. And then we're partners in a feed yard in just east of Billings, Montana, where those cattle are finished on grain. So we do a grass-fed, grain-finished product, and we can talk about why we do that and why we think that's the right way to go for the customers that we're shooting for. But then those cattle are processed and distributed both online nationwide as well as locally here in Montana. And then in 2025, we're looking at expanding that with our restaurant partners that we work with. So when we say start to finish, we mean start to finish, 100% right here in Montana. A lot of people do different things, and that's fine. But there's less people out there that do that entire process. So we want our customers to know that we provide quality assurance and care the entire way. And with that being said, that kind of dictates what our day looks like depending on the time of year. So I'll start with now, and I'll just kind of try to keep it brief. So right now in the winter time, we have our base cow herd, which is our females that produce calves every single year. The steers or the males that get castrated in the spring basically go into the beef program pipeline, and the females go into our live cattle production program in more of our female production. And we can talk more about that depending on how
What
cattle
kind of cows?
nerdy. We run 100% Black Angus on our primary cow herd, and then we also do Angus Wagyu cross on our heifer development, which would be our young females that'll come back into our cow herd. And there's a number of reasons we do that, which I'm happy to talk about. And just stop me if I'm getting like too cattle nerdy for you. Like what you learn with this whole thing, and what I'm still continuing to learn, is like the depth of beef production and cattle production. It's such a vast topic that you can do, you could honestly do a podcast on like any area of that. I'll try to keep it as general as I can, and I'll circle back to the Wagyu program and why we do that and how we do it. But right now, our Black Angus cows that are all bred cows, so they'll start calving around April 15th, are all at kind of our headquarters southern portion of the ranch. And those cattle right now get fed hay every single day. We kind of adjust the amount of hay that gets fed to those cows. I wouldn't say quite on a daily basis, but definitely on a weekly basis. And that's very weather dependent, and will fluctuate anywhere from 22 pounds per head per day to upwards of 30 pounds per head per day. And again, the colder it is, the more they get fed. And also we're kind of gauging every single day, how do those cattle look when you're putting feed out to them? Are they eating all of it? Are they leaving some on the ground? So there's all these little bit of like indicators that we're looking at a daily basis as we're feeding, and we're adjusting the the amount of hay that those cattle get fed. But right now, those cattle have worked all the way through their grazing program. And so we put hay up or buy hay in the summer that feeds those cattle. Typically for us, it's around January 1st through around, 1st of April, mid-April is when those cattle are getting fed hay. And some of that hay comes right off the ranch. Other of that comes from local hay producers that we buy from. And so that's kind of what those cattle. So every day, the crew is either, every day those cattle get fed. And then depending on what the weather's doing, we're managing snow. But the number one priority right now between January 1st and April 1st is that those cattle get fed, the right amount of feed every single day. And we make sure that regardless of how cold it gets, they always have, the water that they need available as well. And then that would be the cattle at the ranch. And then our cattle in our feed yard right now that are in their finishing portion of the, kind of production cycle, they're on, there's varying sizes of those cattle. We just shipped a load of cattle yesterday that are getting processed this morning. And, so as that group leaves, another group will come in. And then those cattle are on a very specific kind of grow ration to finish them. And same thing, those cattle get fed, multiple times every single day, a very specific ration that is to meet the nutritional requirements that we're shooting for and the gross requirements that we're shooting for. Also thinking about where those cattle are going to grade, for the target that we're shooting for our customers, which for us is choice, upper choice, and prime. And a lot of that comes down to the genetics of those cattle and the genetic capability for them to grade into the areas we want them to, paired with the nutritional program. And all of that happens at the feed yard. So primary function right now during the winter, for both the cows at the ranch and the cattle that are in the feed yard is, feed, water every single day. That doesn't matter if it's 30 and sunny or negative 40 and blizzard.
Yeah. The couple of questions on just to get in on that is how old are they when they're going to get processed? So from calf to full size, what is a typical weight of them? And then obviously I'll ask you now is what made you guys decide to do a grain finish?
Gotcha. So typically we're processing those cattle anywhere between 20 and no older than 30 months. If they exceed 30 months, it excludes them from being graded into, like by USDA grading criteria into, prime choice, select, etc. So we don't kill anything over 30 months. And typically we don't kill anything below 20 months, but a lot of that has to do with the size. And so we're typically killing those cattle anywhere between, 13 and 1,400 pounds. And that is being achieved through that finishing process at the feed yard, where they are getting it's a grain supplemented diet that also contains grass. It's a combination of different things that our nutritionist basically puts together. But the difference there is a grain, whether that's corn or a distiller's grain or a variety of different things that go into that ration. And what that is going to do is allow for a higher level of deep muscle marbling. So there's a very specific stair-step process that happens from when those cattle come into the feed yard, typically around 850 pounds, to when they leave the feed yard around 1350, and they get stair-stepped up to a finishing ration. Typically takes about 150 days. And what we're looking for there is to develop deep muscle marbling. That is going to be not the only criteria, but a big criteria in how those cattle ultimately grade. And for us, shooting for that upper choice and prime, what we're trying to target there is, really for us, it's a restaurant quality beef for not only our restaurant customers, but also for our online customers that are able to buy and have that delivered to them. But what we're shooting for is a premium beef product that is going to have a dining experience, like you would find, whether you're at a great restaurant or that you're grilling at home. And that grain finish ultimately is how you're going to achieve that. The big thing for us is quality and consistency. So consistency not only in size, but consistency in quality, so that when we deliver, a case of Little Bell premium beef, whether to a restaurant or to your doorstep, you're getting a very similar experience or the same experience every time you're eating it. And that's from the size of the ribeye you just bought to the flavor profile of that and the quality. So you're not going to, all of a sudden you're not going to get some select in there when you're used to getting upper choice and prime.
Yeah, that's nice. Then are you getting into doing an American Wagyu program as well?
So we do an American Wagyu program right now. We work with a company called Mishima Reserve out of Seattle, and we produce live cattle for that program. And what that does for us is we take Wagyu bulls and we breed them to our heifer females, which are 100% Black Angus, and they create for that heifer's first calf a American Wagyu or 50% Angus, 50% Wagyu, excuse me. And we grow those calves while they're on the cow, and then we typically will put them in the feed yard and grow them to a certain size, and then we sell them into that program. And what that allows us then to do is rebreed that same Angus female back into our Angus herd. So now she's 100% Angus, and then we ultimately keep that, what you would call like a 2 coming 3-year-old, as our replacement. So every year you have cows that cycle out of the cow herd. So if you want to keep your cow herd, I'm just going to make it up at 500. We would assume we would lose 50 every year for a variety of reasons, from age to performance to just, for some reason they don't fit the profile any longer. And then you would backfill them with 50 head so that you're keeping your numbers at 500, if that makes sense. So you have replacements, which are your better, your females that you're going to keep into your cow herd. And then that's how you keep your numbers basically the same. So our Wagyu program is kind of twofold. Number one, it produces cattle for that American Wagyu program. Number two, it helps us develop our females. And there's a number of benefits for that heifer development program of using those Wagyu bulls to do that, but then breeding them back into our Angus program and kind of protecting the genetic
Their map,
of those cattle, because and again, we could do a whole podcast on just like, and for us, again, like everybody does things slightly different, like in any business. And I'm never somebody that goes like, oh, this is the right way to do it. It's just what works really well for us.
Yeah, and if you're seeing consistency, that's and getting a good product, and you're doing it. I've talked to, whether it's farmers or butchers that get, they're Wagyu, Japanese Wagyu experts. So it's interesting to hear what you guys are up to. So you guys are doing different practices. Tell me about kind of using some technology with tradition, helping you guys run the ranch. And I know you guys are doing regenerative practices as well. So how's that going?
Yeah, no, it's going great. I mean, we've seen massive improvement. So what we did with the ranch is we put 3 properties, that were probably at one point all one property, back together. One of those was a recreational property that was underutilized. One of them was kind of a neglected group of, it was not a well-functioning operation by any means. And that one was overgrazed. And then one of them was like a family cow-calf operation and, probably had the best management. But one of the first things that I had to do when we came into that was kind of balance out the grazing program. So there were certain places we could get more days on, certain places we could get less days on. And my goal was to make it that when you drove up the road, if there weren't any fences, you wouldn't know where the boundaries used to be, right? And when we first bought it, I mean, you could tell immediately because the grass was this high and there was none on the other, right? And the other one had some. My goal is then to develop a program that move those cattle, rotationally through the ranch to basically put them on the right grass, the right time, for the right number of days. And a big thing with grazing management is the right number of cattle on a specific size pasture for a very specific number of days. And ultimately what you're doing is you're eating that grass and you're moving on so that it's getting some sort of regrowth. And you might come back to that depending on what your plan is, or you might not come back to it to the following year. We try to not come back to those pastures at the same time with the same numbers or same, kind of age group of cattle, because the more variation you can build into your program, the more plant diversity that you're ultimately creating through doing that. It's better for the ground. It's better for the diversity. It's ultimately better for the cattle. And so we built that out, and I'll just go through again, kind of like, what does a day look like? We hit the winter stuff. As we progress into the spring, we'll move into calving. The cows at the ranch will start, having calves. We basically have different groups that get managed specifically. So like the heifers will be a separate group, and the running age cows, as we would call them, which is our primary herd, would be a separate group. They start calving. So, we're monitoring that on a, kind of daily basis. And you're starting to get kind of a idea of, you're monitoring the cows, for kind of birth support, if need be, calves for sickness. Then you progress into the summer, those calves all get branded. The bull calves get castrated, and then they go on into the, rotation. So once we get into the summer, those cattle typically move up more into the more of the mountainous areas. And again, we're just moving them through pastures. Typically, we're anywhere from 5 days to 30 days, depending on the size of the pasture. So those cattle are getting moved frequently. And the cows with calves would be a group. And then we have another group of yearling steers, which would be basically the calves from last year that are still at the ranch, but they get separated into their own group. And so do the heifers. And so you basically have these like multiple groups that are being managed throughout the ranch. So your plan really has to, encapsulate like all these different groups, and there's certain criteria where like this group can't be next to that group. And so you're almost building like 3 grazing plans in one that all have to work together. So typical day there is like, again, our crew and I will be out either like moving cattle, monitoring cattle, you're assessing cattle for health and well-being. That transfers into the fall. Those cattle will start making their way back down kind of towards our headquarters. Then in the fall, we'll wean all those calves off the cows. They get sorted into 2 groups. You're basically your males and females. The males, basically go into the beef production pipeline, the females into the female production pipeline. And, there's a whole bunch of things that happen in the fall where all those cattle come down, and then you take all your cows, you basically go through all of them ones and determine which ones are bred, which get kept, which will produce calves the following year.
Sorting portion, right?
Correct. Yep. So if you ever look at our Instagram or whatever, you'll see videos of us like in the corrals, and we're sorting cattle, and there's a lot of organization that has to happen at that point, because there's a lot of things that have to happen, and those are like big points of performance in ranching as a whole, where you want to see how many bred cattle do you have, right, that you're going to be kept, because that's going to help you determine what does next year look like, and then how many of those ones do you have to bring back in to keep your numbers where you want them to be. You're looking at your weights of your calves, your overall health and well-being of those calves. And a lot of that plays into, the way that those cattle are handled throughout that process. So we really focus on this low stress stock handling, the rotational grazing, putting the cattle on the best feed possible for like the nutritional requirements that they have at that time, all plays into that overall performance that we're kind of gauging how we did for the year. There's financial and profitability indicators, but there's also performance indicators. And that goes from on the female side as well as on the, kind of the beef production side. And we're tracking all of those things. So there's a ton of office work that goes into this that, I think a lot of people don't maybe realize, the level of organization in kind of structure that goes into the overall system that has to be tracked through. And if you think about it, decisions that you make, on like a genetic, program or something, you might not see the outcome of that decision for 2 years. So you really have to track through all that stuff to really see how you're performing as a business.
Yeah. And yeah, a lot of people don't realize how, and that's kind of why I wanted you to explain it, because a lot of people don't understand the work that goes into it. You're not just, running around herding some cattle and then you're like, oh, it's on your plate, and I kind of wanted to let people know what it takes from pasture to get it in front of you. We can go into what you guys are curing, and you guys are, which is awesome to see, is your meat is on Crowd Cows, how the consumer can get it. They've been around a while. They're kind of one of the first websites I ever saw that had premium beef on there. And tell us what you guys offer, and then I got some questions about that.
Yeah. And then I'll just touch this quickly. Like traditionally in cattle production, right? Like the way that the majority of people, access good high quality beef, and it is, is you'd have cow calf producers that produce calves. Then they would sell those to, another producer that would grow those cattle to a certain size and age class. They would then typically sell them into, a feed yard that would finish those cattle, that then sells them into a national, beef program that processes and distributes those cattle. So it's a very like phase line approach. And you typically, like, your cow calf diet doesn't track those cattle after they get sold. So, they're not going to the feed yard to see, what was the performance or how those cattle cared for. And so one of the things that we are really proud of is the fact that we can trace and have, management decision making and quality assurance all the way through. So when people buy cattle or beef from Little Belt Cattle Company, I mean, they know exactly who and where that is coming from. And that is very different from how most people, there's people out there that buy cattle at, around 800 pounds and they grow them to a certain point. But, unless you're buying them directly from somebody that and you know exactly, what the genetic, program is on those, but most people don't, right? And that's not a knock on that at all. It's just, there is a at each of those phase lines, that you kind of lose like the traceability of what happened before they had that. And so you really don't know exactly where those cattle came from, right? Like if you go and buy, a steak at the grocery store, like you're not seeing like a stamp on that says this started here and then it went here and then it went here. When people buy from Little Belt Cattle Company, literally somebody could call me and go like, hey, what are like the genetic things that you guys shoot for your program? And I could sit here and bore a lot of people about what that looks like, right? Hey, what does your calving program look like? What does your yearling program look like? What is your feeder program? We literally could walk you through, and we could bring people out. We bring customers of ours and go, these are the cattle that, are the next ones that are going to the processor. These are the next ones in that pipeline. Oh, let's go to the ranch now. We'll look at the yearlings that are going to backfill those cows. Oh, let's look at the calves that next year will be the yearlings, right? That's a very different model. And it's hard because there's a a lot of variation in the skill set that it takes to do that across the board, right? But that's that vertical integration that we offer, that there's a lot of people out there that kind of like claim they offer that really don't. And we truly can showcase that. And we showcase that. Like if people look at our Instagram or go online, I mean, you can see all those different things. And our team has to really be an expert, at all those phases, to include then, overseeing production at the processing plant, to the distribution, etc. So anyway, that just gives you a little bit of like back history on what a standard model would look like. And again, nothing wrong with that at all. It's just a little bit different where we do that same model. We just do it all the way through our own program.
Yeah. No, it's a great clarification, because I think a lot of people don't, I keep telling people like, it's nice to get, if you can you find a farm or ranch that or that you're familiar with, and you educate yourself on it. And then you're like, oh, just order from them, because you know what you're getting. You go to these random grocery stores, and a lot of us lately, especially after COVID, just getting back into health, getting healthier, learning nutrition, learning, just knowing where our food comes from. It sounds silly, but like I tell my dad, I'm like, Dad, the milk you had when you were a kid is not the milk we get at the store. There's like 9,000 different kinds of it.
Yep.
And so
And
like, it's nice to understand, how much you guys, the intricate process from everything you're doing before it even gets in front of you.
exactly. And, people have options today, right? And like you could say, there's, there's hormone-based programs. There's, you know, uh, no antibiotic-based programs. There's all these different things out there. And the labeling actually is like fairly confusing. And a big thing I tell people all the time too, is like a prerequisite for liking Little Belt Cattle Company and liking our product and liking what we do isn't that you have to dislike everybody else. There's a lot of great producers out there, and it's never been easier to support small local US producers. And, the online distribution now allows people really anywhere to have access to like really high quality, nutrient dense beef that comes from great producers. And you have access to know who and where your food comes from. And that's something that is new and I think is huge. When I tell people like, if you're supporting, good local producers and if you're in California and you order from us, you're supporting a local Montana producer, right? And if you order from somewhere else, you're supporting local. Or if you go to your local farmer's market, you're doing that the same way. A lot of these different companies, and I don't think people realize how much export beef gets put into the U.S., where then you really have no idea how that was produced. You have no idea how that animal was treated. You have no idea what the kind of the program that animal followed. And a lot of those, programs, there's a lot of variation to that, right? But people have access now to know. And if somebody shoots me an email, I mean, we can go through exactly the protocols that we follow. And that may be or may not be right for the customer, but the fact that they have access to that information now, and if you're working with a local, smaller producer and you're ordering directly from them, I encourage you to ask them that. Get a good idea of exactly. And if they don't have good answers for you, I would look someplace else. And you can start to tell by people's, their marketing. There's a lot of gimmicks out there. There's a lot of things that people do to try to make their product look like something that it may not be. And then there's people that are extremely transparent, and we try to be extremely transparent about, I mean, you can look at what we're doing. It's seasonally on point. We don't show pictures of us doing stuff where it's 90 degrees and sunny and green grass, when in actuality it's, 20 degrees outside, because we actually are there every single day doing it at every single level. And we show people that. And we want customers that want to know truly who and where did this come from, right? And we can do that through all of the live cattle. And then that transitions into our beef and back to like the performance, where we're looking and assessing our program and how that's performing, kind of, on the rail at the processor, but also on plates. I mean, we go to the restaurants that serve our product. We know what that product eats ultimately like. And that's a very important thing to us, where, I tell people all the time, if you're a standard cow-calf operator, and you wouldn't have any reason, you're producing a part of the process. But it'd be like a winemaker that never tries their own wine. So how do you know, like, it may be the target that they're shooting for isn't the end result on your plate. For us, it is. There's also, female herd development, performance points that go into that as well. But for us, like, we want to know, what does it taste like? What does it eat like? We work with some amazing chefs that have helped us dial in our program on our processing side, on our, what's the right size to process at, what's the right, all these things. And to be a local, truly vertigrated supply chain, that is what it is. It's a chain. Any break in that chain has upward and downward, negative or positive effects. We could produce the best product in the world, and if we don't have restaurants and customers to buy it, it piles up in the freezer and we don't have a business. If we don't have a great, feed yard pipeline, then we don't have a supply chain that is meeting the customer requirement on a monthly basis. We have a very structured monthly, this is when our processing days are, these are the cattle that are going out. And that pipeline goes all the way out, a minimum of 12 months. You'll see some people that, they get some cattle, they process some cattle, then they run out. With us being focused on wholesale in high-end restaurants as a customer, we have to hit a weekly deal. And so the planning that goes back, and again, back to that supply chain, we have to have the right number of bred cattle that are going to make the right number of steers that are then going to go through the process of becoming, into the beef program to hit a monthly requirement. We do it, we look at it basically monthly. And that supply chain has to be primed up, but you can't get any backfill on the outflow as well, right? So it takes commitment, and it takes customers voting with their dollars that say, yes, we want this type of product. Yes, we're going to go to a restaurant that buys local, and we're going to support that restaurant, and that supports back into local production, right? We're going to buy online and get, you go to a place that has one of our steaks and you go back, if you're visiting Montana and you go home and you start ordering Little Bell Cattle Company beef, that helps that whole supply chain, because it very much goes both ways. If you don't have the cattle in the system, you can't meet a customer demand, right? And if you have way too much supply and no demand, then you're stuck on that side, right? So there's this, we call
balance.
Allison Snow, who is our director of operation, she calls it the calculator, which is, every time we process, it's like how many head for what's our demand. And right now we have a turnover where it's like, hey, if we process one semi-load at a time, and we go, hey, all right, we got one semi-load. How quick do we turn that over so that the next one coming in is going to backfill that, right? And it's this very ongoing process. And truly, any glitch along the way has big impact both up and down, which makes it really stressful, to be honest.
Yeah, I bet, because it's every part of the process. If there's one little hiccup, that needs to be taken care of, and then you can go on to the next thing. And I think you explained that, there are some ranches, they just raise livestock and then send them on their way to the next process. They're not getting it down to the end product where you're getting a steak or a specific cut. So they don't, like you said, they don't ever see it. So let's get into the cuts.
The majority of your cow-calf / yearling producers would as those cattle move through the system, some of them may get some feedback back if they're into a specific program, but your typical beef cattle production in the United States, you would not get feedback, and you would, unless it was completely random, you typically wouldn't be eating a steak that came from one of the calves that you produce. Even in Montana alone, only 2% of the beef consumed in Montana is from Montana, 100%.
Yeah, and that's kind of strange when you think about it.
Yeah, and a big thing, right, part of the kind of regenerative modeling that we're doing is, we're decreasing the transport distances in time. That is better for cattle, handling, maintenance, management, and all that plays into just good, animal husbandry practices. But it also decreases the amount of fuel. It decreases the trucking distance. So it all kind of piles up. And so by keeping things localized, our cattle never go more than 90 miles throughout that entire, kind of production process, up until, once they're at that finishing weight, which is amazing. And a lot of time those cattle travel, much further distances. But a key thing for our program is actually getting that feedback, good or bad, to see how we're doing. And a lot of that comes down to then the way that we're running and managing the decisions we're making. How are we doing? And I love the fact that, we have really great local support from, restaurateurs and local chefs and different people that have truly helped us develop our program. And like I said, it is a absolute partnership when it comes down to this local supply chain, from, the distribution to the customer, and in every step along the way is critical. And also proving to them that, a smaller local producer beef company can also compete with the big guys like, your Cisco's, your US Foods, etc. Because that's the smiling, easy guy that's always there and goes, oh, I can get you what you need whenever you want it.
Mhm.
Does there a story behind it? No. Can I get it for you? Sure. And that has been the norm, but I think we're starting to see a shift in customer demand with more and more people wanting to know, how, who, and where that came from. And you're seeing consumers now voting with their dollars, and there's a competitive advantage that I think restaurants have by serving products that they can speak to. I think it's cool that, a service person could be like, oh, that's the guy right there from the ranch, and he's sitting there eating a steak too, right?
Yeah.
Like bringing it back to that kind of local knowing all that stuff I think it's really interesting. And I think a lot of people like that. We get tons of people that want to know about, oh, how do we do this? How do we do that? What's the benefit? What's the, you know, it's a very, even doing these podcasts, for me, it's like, there's a big, like, almost like a customer education thing, but we want people to know, um, where the industry as a whole, it wasn't always in the best interest for the customer to see that whole process, right? We feel like it is because we're extremely proud of how we do that, in the time, effort, and care that our team, which is these are professionals that are dedicated professionals to doing this, and the time, effort, and care that they put in every step along the way is something that we're like extremely proud of and we want to showcase.
Yeah. And the chefs especially have known this process for a while. They're, I especially being in San Francisco, the farm to table movement with Chef Alice Waters. She started that a long time ago, and she was like, why am I getting lettuce from like 10 states over when we've got a grower that's 50 miles from us, or not even that far, away, especially with California, as tons of agriculture in California. So yeah, lessening that distance of how far that product needed to travel. And then the chefs figured out like, oh, I can get fish from, the wharf where this guy's bringing in different products as close as possible. And so like, it's nice that customers now more and more, not just the professional chefs, are interested in knowing where everything comes from, and then getting that education a lot more easier. Like, they can, like you said, they can shoot you a question if they have a question about your product, and there you are. There's the guy that's working with the product on a day-to-day basis and getting all that info, which is awesome.
When you were a chef, did you do like the ordering? Um, so you know how it goes, right? Like if you go through Cisco or US Foods, it's all right there. You go on like one website, you punch in what you need, truck shows up and delivers it, right?
Yeah.
They also, the way that they buy boxed beef, right? It gives them like a level of control that you don't get from what I'm going to call like a vertically integrated. Anytime you get something that's like truly like, handmade or made all the way through, you almost should expect that at some point there's going to be something that isn't great, because that shows you that you're getting a full, like if you get something handmade, right, there might be a stitch that isn't perfect, right? But that it's handmade because of that. On beef. And so for us, like, it's critical, but it's really hard, right? Because we want everybody to have a great experience. Yeah. These animals they're living things, right? They're all different. But what's interesting to me, and I think what it takes for people to appreciate, is that like, if there's a great experience, they can call and get that back to us. If there's an experience where we're like, ooh, this for some reason wasn't as good as this, we go back through that and look at like, maybe why didn't that happen, right? Mm-hmm. But it's a harder process because now you've got to like order through us, and then our delivery schedule is different. I think that we've worked very hard to like cater to the fact that like we've got more agility. We'll have somebody call us on Christmas and go, "Hey, we ran out of this," and we go, "Oh yeah, we'll get it to you, no worries," right? Um, but it's a very different in getting chefs to like kind of change the way that they're used to doing it. And again, we all like the easy process, but that doesn't ultimately give you typically the best, right? Like the easiest path typically doesn't lead to the 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 best outcome, right?
Right.
And I think the same thing is happening now in food. Like it's harder to go like, oh, I'm going to go through this person and this person, but the food and the restaurant experience that you're creating, or the home dining experience that you're creating by doing that, is like night and day different from the people that are taking the easy path.
Yeah, 100%. And let's get into the meat
Okay.
of everything. So you've got, I've seen what you guys are offering. So you got a ribeye, New York strip, tomahawk, tri-tip, filet, flat iron, sirloin, ground beef, and skirt steak, right?
Yeah, I mean, we honestly do. So this is another big thing for us, right? Like we have to move literally as much of that carcass as possible because we own it all the way through, right? So just kind of an interesting thing to think about, and again, I'm just using this as an example. It's not perfect, but for like every one tenderloin customer we have, we need 10 grind customers, right? Because you get a certain amount of grind, certain amount of tenderloins, and all the way through. And again, the calculator assesses like what cut and how much do we get of each thing, and then you're basically pricing that out across the board, right? And your smaller cuts that have like higher, whether it's tenderloin or something that has more tenderness or is, are priced accordingly. And then it goes all the way down through. But, we get people sometimes that don't understand, like there's a very like structured approach to pricing out those cuts to make up the entire carcass. But we literally do everything from oxtail to beef cheeks and everything in between. And, we use, organ meat gets sold to a local guy that does dog food and dog treats. We literally are maximizing, from, bones for, bone broth and those sorts of things, but we have to have customers because we don't have a retail outlet, right? So we have to have customers for all those different things. So there's a lot of like business development and sales and partnership that goes in to be able to move those carcasses. Because the worst thing you can have, right? If we based our kill numbers off of the tenderloins we could sell, we would have a massive grind problem because
right,
that would just pile up, right? And it's basically, it's like exponential to each other. So you're like, hey, I killed one head, this is what I get. You got to know that you could move all that product and evenly, right? And all of that happens through, and it took us a lot of learning to figure that out. But now we have it down to where like our stuff is more like pre-allocated. We're not so much selling. There's times where we go, oh, hey, we got a little bit of this, let's put on sale. Let's, but typically now we go, hey, we know all these go here. This goes here. This goes here. And that's how we're able to turn that freezer over on a very regular schedule. And the other thing that is cool about that is like the beef that we're selling is very close to that processing date where you're not going to have this whole long waiting thing that you have no idea, like when was that process? Like you're as close to that process as possible when you're receiving that product because of how quickly we turn over everything. But it takes a lot of work to find all those different outlets. And everybody wants something slightly different. Like our online customers and the cuts that you would get online are different from like our restaurant customers. And that's just a function of, how do you eat at home versus how does the restaurant, what does their menu look like? So there's a lot that goes into these cut sheets. It's a ton of organization. It's a ton of partnership with our processor. And again, miscutting that product, ultimately, it doesn't lead to loss, but it could lead to loss of that cut into like, if it's miscut, it might have to go into grind versus, being a, yeah, exactly. And it still gets sold. You just might not get max value. So, we basically, can do pretty much everything. And it's a little bit seasonal at times. Like right now, we sell like a lot of chuck roasts and different things that, you might not sell as many of now, but you sell a ton of in the summertime, right? And that's just kind of seasonal, how people eat in the winter versus how they eat in the summer. And so we ultimately change our cut sheets and our offerings, on a 6-month basis to really kind of target that. And that's something we've just kind of learned. And we also we have great people who work with us, and, some of the folks that, like the guy we work with on our local distribution stuff has been in beef retail for a long time. And so, kind of dialing in the seasonality of it and having the right cuts at the right time is huge, on moving that product, kind of on the time frame that we look to.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask, because those are usually the recognizable cuts that everyone kind of knows. And it's nice to hear about where the other stuff is going, or that the cow is getting used up. Where are some of the cuts? Like, are there any restaurants you can highlight that some of the other stuff is going to? Like, I like picanha. Some people like beef plated ribs, right? Those Big Daddy dino ribs. Are there any places that we can find those?
If you come, so we're still very like pretty local based here, primarily in Bozeman, in Big Sky, and kind of the surrounding area. We also work with some restaurants in Billings, but kind of that Bozeman, Big Sky, greater Yellowstone area is our prime market. And so there's a number of restaurants that again go everywhere from super high end white tablecloth, where they've got tomahawk ribeyes, they've got tenderloins, they've got strip loins, all these things, down to some great like local bars that serve burger, and that trim comes from the exact same carcasses, right? So upper choice and prime carcasses. A lot of grind programs nationwide will just there's different level of cattle, right? They'll buy different cattle, to do different things, right? All the grind and trim. So like if you're getting a burger from Little Bell Cattle Company, that's coming from the same carcasses as the ribeyes at, the place down the street. And, so we have a bunch of different restaurants that really do work through a variety of different things. And then obviously our online customers as well, there's a different market there as well. But really through all of those is how we're able to utilize that entire carcass, really efficiently, because, if you look from like a profitability standpoint, that ultimately is what it comes down to. You have to use, you have to use every ounce of that thing that you can, because all of that plays back into profitability. And by the time, like for us, by the time we're, at the point of processing and put those in the freezer, I mean, we're into those cattle for thousands of dollars along the way. And I'll hit on this too, which this is something we're like super proud of, and is something that Tim and I have both, is really important to us, and something that I think is really cool about what we do. So we provide a lot of the ground beef for a number of school districts here in Montana. And part of the way that we're able to like basically be competitive on the low end is that we sell to some of these like higher places, and we're then able to kind of offset some of the pricing, and we're able to truly meet our original goal, which was getting that product back into our local communities. And, Tim and I always talk about like, why wouldn't Montana kids be eating Montana beef? Well, it wasn't available at a price point that those school districts could get into it for, right? So we have been able, because of the markets that we target here locally, is able to kind of help offset some of that, to put that truly back in into our community, really in a meaningful way. And there's tons of studies of, kids eating and having access to good, high quality, food is hugely important to their performance, right? As like they grow and learn. And, it's something that's been like really cool. And, the school district that my kids go to, all the beef there is all from us. And, there's a picture of Tim's family and my family, there on the bulletin board. It's like, this is where your beef comes from, right? This is where your kids' beef comes from. And that's really cool, and Those are some things that we're like super proud of. And again, we've got a whole list, and I'm happy to go through it too. Right now, but if you come into Montana and into Bozeman and Big Sky, we really have restaurants that fit, what you're looking to do. If you're like, oh, let's, date night and we want to spend some money. It's like, cool, you should go here. Hey, it's me and a couple buddies. We're skiing. We're going to be in town. We just want to get some burgers. It's like, oh, great, you should go here. Right. And we kind of have everything in between, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can get that from you, and we'll just put it in the show notes for everybody. We don't have to go down the list.
Sure.
Some of the clients, are like, hey, it's awesome. You also, people don't know, if you are local to where you guys are at, you guys have a burger truck as well.
So we had the burger truck. We actually stopped doing the burger truck, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, we ran the burger truck for a couple of years, and that was like honestly like a big marketing thing as we got going and getting our like product out there. And our goal was like, again, just to get as much product out there as possible.
Yeah.
What unfortunately it was going really well, and it was a great way to get out there, but it was really hard to manage and find the right, like a lot of restaurants, the labor issue was a real issue for us on that. And, there was times where it'd be my wife and I in there, or Tim and I, or my brother would get recruited, and we couldn't, the labor of keeping it going. So ultimately what we've landed on is it's a lot better to work with great partners. So there's a ton of places that serve, little belt beef in their burgers, and there's a variety of different types of burgers, especially in Bozeman and Big Sky now, where you can find us, that isn't us actually doing it. But it was a great way to like touch base with customers. It was a great way to get our product out there. But ultimately, just from like a management perspective, it was a very challenging deal on the labor side to staff regularly and find people that were like, committed to having it out there as regularly as you have to have those things. It honestly taught us a lot about the restaurant business, and you quickly learn that the people who are successful in restaurant are people that really know that, are there every day, and they're super dialed in, and it takes somebody with like a lot of passion, a lot of commitment. And we were trying to find somebody that could come in and help us like run and manage that. And ultimately we weren't able to do that. And with everything else we had going on, we ultimately landed on, let's let the people who do that really, really well, let's partner with them. Let's work with them. We've got one of the partners we already work with, but they're opening like a burger specific deal. That's going to be kind of based around what we were doing with that. But again, we're going to let the pros who do that on a daily basis do that and make us look good, and we'll hopefully make them look good by providing them with ground that makes a next level burger experience.
Yeah, it's cool though to see the name on the side of the truck though, and
it was cool.
That burger's coming out, to the people, which is really
was really fun, and we enjoyed doing it. It was also really hard. It was a lot of work, and again, like it just shows you the labor issues that from that everybody I think faces. We've been really, really fortunate. We have such a great team on the live cattle production side, our beef operation side. Like we have a fantastic team, really across the board. And we ultimately determined, it's kind of one of those things, do you want to spend 80% of your time on something that's, 20% or whatever of your headaches, or do you want to spend, 20% of your time on headaches within the 80% that you're doing really well? And that's kind of where we shifted. And, this whole thing for us has really been a growing experience of trying things and seeing what works and adjusting as we've gone. And that really comes back to the military, I think, in the special operations community. I mean, one of the biggest takeaways I have that I apply to business every day is you should have a great plan. You should go through all the process of planning, but you should never be so tied to that plan that you're afraid to adjust when it's not working. And some of the best people I worked with in the military really taught me that, like, you gotta be paying attention to what's happening around you, and you have to make shifts in your plan to be successful. And that's what we've really done with this business. And there's been things that we thought were going to work great and we had high expectations for that didn't work. And we had other things that we kind of like, ooh, this probably isn't very good. And they turned out to be fantastic. And it's really been just a growing learning experience as we've gone. And we're still learning every single day. I mean, we make tweaks. We really do look at same thing with like kind of back to the military style of doing things. If we do a big cattle movement, we do a pre-brief on it. We execute on that plan. And at the end of the day, we go back through, hey, not so much what all did we do so great and how awesome are we, but what could we have done better? What's something that I maybe did that wasn't so great that nobody else saw that helps the person that's building, growing, and developing? I tell people all the time, like, we will not hire somebody that isn't better at everybody at something. And I truly believe, like, why would you have a team of people that don't bring value in some capacity, right? And we've followed that, kind of as just something that we focus on when we hire. We also are very, very committed to hiring other veterans into this space because we just have seen, the parallels that work so well for us. And we work with some nonprofits and stuff to help develop people, but also to hire people. But that constant course correction towards getting better every single day is something that we really instill in our team and in our process all the way across the board. And, we really kind of follow the, like, good isn't good enough. And that's why we go and touch base with all of our chefs and our restaurants and, hey, how was that? What'd you think of that? What can we do better? What'd you think of that cut? Hey, we're trying this thing. Would you give us some feedback on this? We're going to do this wet age process. This is a 14-day. This is a 20-day. What do you like better? And we want that feedback. And we love working with people that are committed and as passionate about, that end product, because we ultimately lose control of that final piece. I could make you the best steak in the world. And if you properly take it home, yeah. And then you take it home and you throw it in the broiler for, 30 minutes and you're like, that wasn't that good. You're like, wasn't it? Like, and so when we work with these people that make us look good, we try to make them look good, but that constant feedback, and that's something that you just don't get from like that standard buying process that we talked about. That, we not only do we want that feedback, and frankly, we want the feedback when we didn't hit the target as well as we want to be, because that to us is really, really important. And we spend time looking at, like, hey, this is what is working well, but we really focus on what are the areas that we could be improving. And that has been, something I think for Tim and I, as we've built and grown this business and in the ranch. And, we went from what we started at and built, grown, and scaled in a very short amount of time for this industry. And, something I'm really proud about is we're performing, at a very, very high level on the beef side, but we're also performing at a very, very high level on the live cattle side. And both of those are things where, nobody's doing that for any other reason than the quality of the product you're producing, right? They might give you a chance, but if you can't hit the mark and you're not bringing value to them and you're not solving a problem for them, they got plenty of other outlets. And, they might give us a chance because, we're veterans or, they like our story or something, but it's on us then to keep the opportunity.
Yeah. At the end of the day, they want the end product in their hands, and it's good stuff. Yeah. I think it's cool that you guys are not cool, but it's like the training that you guys had in the military with the precision, but then also knowing that a plan never goes as it's supposed to, and then being able to be flexible with it, but using that to just kind of back out and go, oh no, you know what, we can do it this way today because this is what happened today. Like a lot of times I tell people with the restaurants is that chef that took a nice photo of this perfect white coat on, well, about 10 minutes before he did that, there was like 9,000 things going on with people not showing up. This order didn't come in. This machine's broken in the back, whatever it is. Right. So it's always just balancing, that kind of balancing bunch of spinning plates, they're
and
keep them
doing
all
it
going.
Yeah, and you know how this from law enforcement, right? Like this is another big thing that, I think there's all these parallels or just takeaways where I think a lot of people get out of the military and they think, well, this skill set doesn't directly apply to my new job. But it's all these like little things that really do apply in are critical. And, I think one of those is also being able to like manage when things don't go well and don't lose your mind, right? You're not screaming and yelling at people. I mean, I've been at places, at ranches, and I mean, you're just getting, and you're like, nobody's telling you what you're doing wrong. They're just telling you you're wrong, but not what you could be doing to do it right. Right. Like, just like in the military, our crew now, what we're able to do with a large number of cattle and a small crew with very little communication, where people are just reading off each other, they're in the right spot at the right time to get the, to do the right things. All those things, and as like a leader, of that, you have to be the one that when things don't go right, are also like, okay, cool. Like, what's the solution? What are we going to do next? All right, cool. That didn't work so well. How do we fix it? Right. Oh, hey, I thought we wanted to do this. This is happening, but that's not working. Let's change that. Right. And that comes down to like, again, like just good, calm is contagious and so is hysteria. Right. And hysteria typically doesn't get anything done well. And we have just taken like all of those little things. And I tell people like, not only do it's quality assurance, but it's also like a special operations, level of detail and attention to detail in the quality assurance that we put into this program. And frankly, that's why we've been able to like learn how to do a lot of this stuff on probably a shorter timeline, is because of the level of commitment we've made. In the same way that, you draw and reholster your pistol in dry fire, a million times to get that muscle memory. I had to do that with learning how to rope. Our crew still goes out and we practice stuff together. We go to clinics. We go to like, we're constantly striving to get better. And that is very much a a skill that, or just a kind of a mindset that comes from that special operations, law enforcement background of like, if you're not getting better, somebody else is, right? And we are always striving, always learning, always trying to find somebody better who knows more. And we're trying to get as much of that info. And it's been so cool because like we've had such great exposure to like all these people from like the live cattle side to the feed yard, to the processor now, to these chefs. And it's been an incredible journey. And we're still like, we are like so much on like the learning path still. Again, I think it's easy to look at different companies, people, places and go, oh, they're here now, but you miss like kind of what it took to get there. And we very much are still like we never, stand there and go like, oh yeah, we've got this thing figured out. Like I'm constantly like, we don't have anything figured out. We got to keep, what don't we know? Why are we like, why did this happen? And I probably drive our guys like a little bit crazy because, even when it's like, oh, this was perfect, I'm like, yeah, but how could it have gotten a little bit better? Right. And I like people that think that way. And I like people that, when it's hard, they just pull their hat down and go, all right, we're here, and I think all those things have really helped me in that transition process to kind of still find some of those same like points of purpose. And I mean, it's very different, but I talk about this and Tim talks about it, and food security is national security. And the same way as a military member, you provide defense, right? As a food producer in this country, you're also providing like a huge service to the people. And it's something that makes America amazing, is the access to high quality, nutrient dense food from, Americans who produce it. And you can count on, that we all rely upon, and it's a small number of people who do it.
Yeah, 100%. Before, appreciate your time, we're getting up there. A couple more questions before we close it out. What do you see Little Bell Cattle Co. in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, we're really going to continue to focus on the quality and consistency of our product. And that very much goes into as we build, grow, and scale, right? I've talked about this as well, similar to producing special soldiers, you know, if you rush to the quantity, you typically lose some quality, right? So we're very mindful about how we're building, growing, and scaling. In the next 5 to 10 years, I'd love to see, the company to continue to work with strategic restaurant partners at a very high level outside of Montana. I'd like to continue to put, more volume in to the online business as well. I mean, we want to be the go-to uh, beef company for people who truly appreciate this kind of small batch, single sourced, almost like a wine company where, you know, we know that we're not going to be the beef company for everybody, and we don't want to be, but we want to be the beef company for everybody who wants the style of beef that we produce and want a kind of next level beef experience. And over the next 5-10 years, we want to continue to build, grow, and scale as a business, and we want to get just continue to do that, though, in a way that doesn't ever compromise the quality of the program all the way down through that entire process that I talked about.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got some fun questions too before we head out. Obviously, with our jobs, a lot of gear. It was very gear centric. What is something that kind of makes your day easy on the day-to-day basis, gear wise, that somebody would want to know?
Oh
And
man,
it could be something silly, or
yeah,
it could be
it's gonna
something
sound super
super
nerdy, but like,
precision.
yeah, and I didn't get into like the tech stuff, but like honestly, like my phone is like my primary weapon at this point, and just coordinating all the different things, because I'm very much now like more into this like kind of up and out coordinating role, and just fill in where I'm needed, but trying to support our team, trying to remove roadblocks, but also like the cattle management stuff, the ability to access spreadsheets and inventories, and I mean, I'm on my phone a lot, which I think a lot of us currently, we all utilize, but that the ability to like share information, um, you know, and do a lot of different things. So that's one, nerdy wise. It really depends on what the job is. I mean, honestly, like, if I'm at the ranch, it's probably something different than if, I'm trying to help in the freezer or the distribution side. But phone and, honestly, computer, and I spend a lot of time on that, both of those things, making sure that everything we're doing is being tracked, profited, to lead into like the overall profitability, because all this stuff's great, but at the end of the day, it's a for-profit business. We got to be making money, and we got to be tracking every penny. And I have like our controller, accountant, slash CFO, Caitlin Simmons, is like unbelievable. And what she's been able to do for us to track dollars all the way through that entire process has been a huge, huge benefit to our business as a whole.
Yeah, it's awesome. Favorite recipe or dish? Either it's a recipe or dish that you'd want people to try.
So we obviously get asked on the steak side a lot, especially on like the real big, you get a big old tomahawk, like how are you going to cook that thing at home? I'm a huge fan of the reverse sear method on any of those big things. And you can either do it in the oven or low temp on your grill. So you just run, you can buy steak, you can get crazy on the seasoning. I don't think you have to. What we typically do is we'll put salt on both sides, put that thing in the fridge night before, pull it out, bring it up to room temperature before you're going to cook it. Put pepper on the outside as well. Put on your griller in the oven at like 225. Use an internal temperature gauge. Bring it up to about, if you want medium rare, about 125. Take it out, wrap it in tinfoil, and then bring your grill up super hot. and then just do like about 2 minutes on each side, take it off, rest it for, about 10, 15 minutes back in the tinfoil. And your perfect medium rare at that point. That is probably my go-to and probably the recipe or cooking style that I recommend the most. Obviously, that doesn't work on like your thinner cut stuff, but that'll work on roasts. That works on big ribeyes, big 1.5 inch or bigger steaks. But that's probably the recipe I give out the most, or cooking technique.
Awesome. I put out on Instagram yesterday if they had any questions for you. My good buddy Sean, who actually works for a Wagyu company, we can talk about that offline. He asked, "What's success mean to you as the company, and then as on a personal level?" Kind of twofold
Success,
there.
yeah, for sure. Truly, like for us, success is like the quality and consistency of our product, where people are truly, the feedback we get when somebody goes like, they trusted us to be the centerpiece of their Christmas, and they go, oh, it lived up or exceeded their expectations. The ability to do that consistently over time is huge, and where people start to correlate the little bit, premium beef with a higher level beef experience, whether that's just knowing where it comes from or the way that product eats, is truly what the, kind of the success that we're shooting for. But back to that chain, that means you have to have success all the way down through everything, right? So that means from every stage, there has to be like a level of perfection that gets you there, because you don't get there by accident. That also is on the live cattle side. Success for us is that when our live cattle that we're producing are also, going into other people's herds, and we get known, as when you buy, cattle from our ranch program, that there's a value associated with that. We do what we say we're going to do when we're going to do it, and all of that ties into success. But I think the biggest thing for us is the quality and consistency of the program across all those stages. If we're doing that, then we're going to be successful. Uh, you know, that's a good question. I mean, it's kind of obviously tied in that I'm extremely personally, tied in and committed to what we're doing. Um, I don't know. I mean, I really like seeing like development of other people,
Yeah.
for who work for us. I take a lot of pride in the fact that we have like great people, and I tell all of them that, my goal is that we're either going to provide you the next career step opportunity, and if we don't have it, we hope that we got you closer to it. And I really believe in that, and I believe in, when I see other people growing and being successful in their career with us and having kind of a small part in that, I think there's a lot of, I feel a lot of like success and pride in that. I also feel like a lot of pride in success in the fact that this is a family business. It looks probably different than a lot of other ranches. My wife has worked for the business, and as a major part of where we're at, does all of our like marketing, our merchandise. And it's different. Like, she might not be out there every single day, but she's doing stuff every single day that also has a huge impact on the success. My kids come out and are participants in our learning. What does it take to work hard, and what does it take to care for other things that in a meaningful way? Tim's family, the same. It's, there's a huge amount of success that I feel even when I like go look at the ranch and where we're at and what the place looks like now, and seeing these things working. All those things I think are the kind of the cornerstone for me when I look at like, are we being successful or not?
Yeah. Awesome. And on that note, I will leave you the floor. Any advice, any promotions, any upcoming projects you want to talk about, or shout outs to any organizations or companies? Floor is yours, man. Thanks,
Yeah,
Greg.
no, absolutely. I probably talked more than anybody knows who has me on. After coming out of SWT1, where you spend a ton of time just, by yourself, quietly alone. Um, I like to talk about this, and I love this topic. So I really appreciate you having me on. I really appreciate you letting me go through all that stuff. If people have questions, please feel free to reach out. Probably the best way to find us social media wise is on Instagram at Little Belt Cattle Co. Is our deal on that. You can go to our website. Project wise, nothing like major where I'm like, oh yeah, we have this brand new thing coming out. You can find us. One thing I do want to mention, Crowd Cow is one of the places we're at. We also work with another company that's a veteran-owned and operated company out of Kansas, Kansas City Cattle Company. Who they do a Wagyu program, and we provide them Angus. A good friend of mine, and somebody that's become a good friend of mine, who is a Army Ranger, Patrick Montgomery, runs that company, and they've got like kind of a co-op model that they're running now called Valor Provisions. So you also can find our product there. I encourage you to check them out. Really looking at veteran owned and operated producers and giving them a platform for, online distribution. So Patrick's done an amazing job with that. He'd be another good person to come on. I've learned a ton about the Wagyu stuff from them. There's so many little things from like purebred, full blood. We just do the American and just playing that. But Patrick's a really interesting guy, really interesting story. Also, a guy that's building, growing in agriculture. And so you can find us there as well. And I encourage people to take a look at his stuff. Crowd Cow is the other online platform that we work with, who's also been a fantastic partner on, retail and nationwide distribution. We really, really feel fortunate to be working with them. They do a fantastic job on how quickly they get product, and rarely are they out of product, and they've been a fantastic partner. If you come to Montana, if you're in the Bozeman, Big Sky, kind of area, you can look at our website and see all the places we're at. We can't tell you how much we appreciate all the support. You can get merch on our website. We've got some awesome like hoodies, hats, t-shirts, coffee mugs. We do all that stuff in-house. People don't realize in the beginning that was like the first products we had, and it really helped us get through those first couple of years. We really appreciate opportunities to come on podcasts like this and get to talk about, kind of who we are and what we do. And we're super proud of it, and we're super passionate about it. And we look forward to just continuing to, kind of stay the course on all the things that we know it takes to do right to produce the best livestock and beef that we can.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.